Look at you, sitting there in your perfectly climate-controlled room, sipping an overpriced iced coffee, and complaining that your Wi-Fi is being a little slow today. You have absolutely no idea how good you have it. Welcome back to Chimichanga Cinema, the only place on the internet that actively judges your posture while recommending absolute masterpieces. Today, we are throwing our spandex superhero suits into the garbage and strapping on 80 pounds of incredibly uncomfortable, unwashed chainmail. We are diving headfirst into the blood-soaked, mud-covered reality of the Middle Ages. I am talking about an era where dental hygiene was a myth, betrayal was basically the national sport, and getting a minor paper cut could literally send you to the grave. We've compiled a list of 10 medieval movies that will make you want to grab a broadsword, ride a horse into your neighbor's yard, and claim their lawnmower in the name of the king. No laser beams, no CGI aliens, just raw, brutal combat and political backstabbing. Do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so I can keep making these lists. Grab your turkey leg and let's get medieval. Kicking off our list is a movie that proves being a monarch isn't just about sitting on a shiny chair and eating grapes. I'm talking about Netflix's Outlaw King. The year is 1304. The legendary William Wallace has just been executed. The Scottish rebellion is basically a smoldering dumpster fire, and the English king Edward I is acting like an absolute tyrannical maniac. Enter Robert the Bruce, played by Chris Pine. Yes, Captain James T. Kirk himself traded in the Starship Enterprise for a dirty kilt, a broadsword, and a surprisingly decent accent. Robert is a Scottish nobleman who looks around at the absolute misery of his people, sighs heavily, and decides to crown himself the King of Scotland to lead a massive rebellion against England. But this isn't some sanitized, glorious fairy tale. Pine plays Robert not as a perfect saint, but as a deeply flawed, desperate man who is forced to make horrific, bloody decisions just to keep his people from being completely wiped off the map. And we absolutely have to talk about Aaron Taylor Johnson in this movie. He plays James Douglas, a man who has lost his lands and basically turns into a feral, screaming murder machine on the battlefield. The guy is an absolute animal, and his unhinged performance is wildly entertaining. We also get the incredible Florence Pugh playing Elizabeth de Burgh, Robert's wife, who proves that the women of this era had spines made of absolute titanium and supported their men through pure hell. Director David Mackenzie shoots the battles, especially the climatic, mud-soaked nightmare at Loudon Hill, with such brutal, suffocating realism that you will genuinely want to take a shower after watching it. It is violent, it is historically gritty, and it is a masterpiece about what it actually costs to buy your freedom. Robert Bruce proves that to become a king, sometimes you have to become an absolute outlaw. If you loved the first movie, do not unstrap your armor yet, because we are jumping straight into 7 Kings Must Die. Now, if you are a fan of the phenomenal show The Last Kingdom, this is the massive, feature-length grand finale you've been waiting for. And if you haven't seen the show, don't worry. Just sit back and enjoy watching massive armies bash their shields together in the mud. King Edward has just kicked the bucket, and predictably, the entire kingdom immediately falls into an absolute chaotic bloodbath over who gets to wear the crown. Right in the middle of this catastrophic mess is our main guy, Uhtred of Bebbanburg, played once again by Alexander Dreymon. At this point in the timeline, Uhtred is getting up there in years. The man has enough battle scars to resemble a heavily abused cutting board, but he is still out there, swinging his sword and trying to fulfill his lifelong dream of seeing a united England. The plot centers around a massive alliance of rival kings coming together to stop King Æthelstan from taking over the entire island, culminating in the legendary Battle of Brunanburh in 937. Uhtred, despite a mortal wound, forces Æthelstan to promise to make his half-brother Edmund his heir. But the real reason this movie works isn't just the spectacular shield wall combat, it is the brotherhood. Watching Uhtred fight alongside his ride-or-die best friends, Finan, played by Mark Rowley, and Sihtric, played by Arnis Fedorovicius, gives this movie a massive emotional core. These guys have been through absolute hell together, and their loyalty is the only pure thing in a world full of backstabbing politicians. It's a dense, fast-paced, action-packed love letter to the fans, and it perfectly closes the book on one of the greatest historical action series of the last decade. For our third pick, we are slowing down the massive armies and bringing the violence to an incredibly personal, deeply uncomfortable level. Welcome to The Last Duel, directed by the absolute cinematic legend Ridley Scott. The guy gave us Gladiator, so you know he knows how to film guys hitting each other with sharp objects. This is based on the insane true story of the last officially sanctioned trial by combat in 14th century France. Matt Damon, sporting a medieval mullet so hideous it should be considered a literal war crime, plays Jean de Carouge, a grumpy, socially awkward knight. Adam Driver plays his former best friend turned bitter rival, Jacques Legris, a charismatic squire who knows exactly how to manipulate the corrupt political system. But the true star, the absolute anchor of this entire movie, is Jodie Comer, playing Jean's wife, Marguerite. Marguerite accuses Legris of a horrific assault, but because the medieval justice system was basically a giant misogynistic joke, no one believes her. The only way to legally settle the dispute is for her husband and her attacker to fight to the absolute death in an arena. If her husband loses, not only does he die, but Marguerite will be burned alive at the stake for bearing false witness. The genius of this movie is its structure. We see the exact same events play out 3 different times, from the perspective of all 3 characters, showing how massive male egos completely warp the truth. Oh, and Ben Affleck is there too, playing a blonde, orgiastic count who is clearly having the time of his life. The final duel itself is incredibly heavy, exhausting, and brutally violent. It's a masterpiece about truth, honor, and the terrifying reality of being a woman in the Middle Ages. Moving from French duels to the English throne, we arrive at The King. This is Netflix's brooding, incredibly stylish adaptation of William Shakespeare's historical plays, but it is injected with so much modern swagger that the original playwright would probably spill his ale. Timothée Chalamet puts down the sci-fi scripts, gets himself a highly questionable bowl cut, and steps into the shoes of Prince Hal. Hal is basically a medieval frat boy. He spends all his time drinking, sleeping around, and completely avoiding the fact that he is the heir to the throne. But when his father, King Henry IV, played by a wonderfully grumpy Ben Mendelsohn, dies, Hal is forced to put on the crown and clean up the massive political mess his father left behind. Watching Chalamet transform from a careless, hungover teenager into a cold, calculating, and ruthless King Henry V is absolutely hypnotic to watch. He is joined by Joel Edgerton, who plays Falstaff, a grizzled, cynical war veteran who becomes the king's only trusted military advisor. But let's be entirely honest, the man who steals the entire movie is Robert Pattinson. He plays the Dauphin of France, and he delivers his lines with a French accent so utterly bizarre and flamboyant that it borders on absolute comedy, but it works perfectly to make you absolutely hate his guts. The movie culminates in the Battle of Agincourt, and director David Michôd shoots it not as a glorious triumph, but as a claustrophobic, terrifying pileup of armored men drowning in the mud. It is a stunning look at the isolating, soul-crushing weight of power. Alright, we need to set some ground rules for number 5. If you are going to watch Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, you absolutely, positively must watch the director's cut. The studio completely butchered the theatrical release, but the extended version is easily one of the greatest historical epics ever put to film. We are heading to the 12th century, right into the burning heat and absolute political nightmare of the Crusades. Orlando Bloom plays Balian, a French blacksmith who is grieving the tragic loss of his family. Out of nowhere, Liam Neeson shows up, announces he is Balian's father, and drags him across the world to Jerusalem. Balian suddenly finds himself knighted and thrust into the middle of a massive, explosive conflict between the Christian forces and the Muslim army led by the legendary Saladin. The scale of this movie is absolutely staggering. The practical sets, the thousands of extras, the towering siege engines, they just don't make movies this massive anymore. But amidst all the glorious carnage, the movie has a massive beating heart. Edward Norton plays King Baldwin IV, the Leper King of Jerusalem. The man is covered head to toe in bandages and wears a silver mask for the entire film. And yet, using only his voice and body language, Norton delivers one of the most commanding performances of his entire career. Add in Eva Green playing the deeply conflicted Princess Sibylla, and you have an absolute masterpiece. It is a massive, philosophical war movie that asks whether a man can remain truly righteous in a world completely corrupted by religious fanatics. Balian learns the ultimate lesson. You don't defend the stones of a city, you defend the people. Number 6 on our list brings us back to Ridley Scott. Seriously, does this guy own a time machine? In 2010, Ridley teamed up with his gladiator buddy Russell Crowe to give us a completely different, grittier take on the legend of Robin Hood. Forget the bright green tights, the playful archery contests, and the singing animals. This is Robin Hood painted in mud, blood, and massive political conspiracy. Crowe plays Robin Longstride, an aging, exhausted archer fighting in the brutal army of King Richard the Lionheart. When the king dies, Robin and his boys decide to desert the army and head back to an England that is absolutely falling apart under the rule of the whiny, tyrannical King John. This movie is essentially a massive, big-budget prequel to the legend you already know. It shows exactly how a regular, cynical soldier becomes the iconic outlaw. Crowe plays Robin like a medieval tank. He's quiet, lethal, and looks like he could punch a horse to the ground. Cate Blanchett steps in as Lady Marian, and she is no damsel in distress. She is a fierce, independent survivor managing a dying estate. And because every movie needs a villain you want to punch in the face, Mark Strong plays Godfrey, a ruthless traitor helping the French invade England. The movie trades whimsical forest robberies for massive beach landings, brutal castle sieges, and hardcore political betrayal. It is a heavy, testosterone-fueled origin story that proves, sometimes, the legend is born out of pure survivalist necessity. Not every hero wears a crown. Sometimes they wear a hood. Let's take a massive detour from historical realism and inject some high-octane, slow-motion, magical adrenaline straight into our veins. At number 7, we have Guy Ritchie's wildly underappreciated King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Imagine the classic Arthurian legend, but everyone talks like a fast-hustling gangster from a British crime movie. Charlie Hunnam plays Arthur, but he doesn't know he's royalty. He's just a tough, street-smart hustler running a massive underground mafia operation in the dirty back alleys of Londinium. Then, the water drops, he pulls a glowing Excalibur out of a rock, and his entire life turns completely upside down. He finds out his uncle, Vortigern, murdered his parents to steal the throne. And Vortigern is played by Jude Law, who is having an absolutely phenomenal time playing a slick, deeply evil magical tyrant who literally sacrifices his own family members to giant squid witches for power. Arthur has to team up with a mysterious mage, played by Astrid Bergès-Frisbee, and a crew of rebels including Jaimon Hansu to take his uncle down. The movie is a total visual trip. It's got 300-foot-tall CGI elephants, incredible magical martial arts sequences, and that signature Guy Ritchie hyperkinetic editing style. Critics completely tore this movie apart, and it bombed at the box office, but they were wrong. It is a wildly entertaining, insanely fun popcorn flick that doesn't take itself too seriously. If you want your medieval fantasy with a heavy dose of swagger and a pounding rock soundtrack, this is your jam. The sword chooses the king, but the king chooses his destiny. Alright, straighten your backs and wipe that blue paint on your face, because at number 8, we have the granddaddy of all medieval epics, Braveheart. Let's address the elephant in the room right immediately. Historically speaking, this movie is an absolute disaster. The kilts are from the wrong era, the Battle of Stirling Bridge is entirely missing the actual bridge, and the timeline is a complete mess. But do we care? Absolutely not. Because Mel Gibson directed and starred in a masterpiece of pure, unadulterated cinematic emotion. He plays William Wallace, a Scottish commoner who just wanted to farm his land and hang out with his wife in the late 13th century. But when the brutal English troops murder her, Wallace basically turns into a 13th century John Wick and launches a massive, bloody revolution against English dominance. Gibson's performance is electric, delivering speeches so powerful they make you want to fight your own landlord for freedom. Patrick McGoohan plays King Edward I, known as Longshanks, and he is a villain of pure, ice-cold malice who throws his own advisors out of castle windows. Sophie Marceau plays Princess Isabella, adding a layer of tragic romance to a movie that is otherwise packed with some of the most visceral, chaotic, and brutally realistic battle scenes ever filmed. Braveheart isn't a documentary. It is a primal scream about the human desire for independence. It grabs you by the heart on minute 1 and doesn't let go until the very last iconic cry for freedom. They can take our lives, but they will never take our freedom. After all that heavy, emotionally devastating warfare, we desperately need a massive palate cleanser. Luckily, at number 9, we have the most fun, aggressively anachronistic medieval movie ever made, A Knight's Tale. How do you start a movie set in the 1300s? By having a massive crowd of peasants do the wave and sing Queen's "We Will Rock You" at a jousting tournament. It shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. Heath Ledger, radiating pure movie star charisma, plays William Thatcher. He is a poor squire who watches his knight die between rounds and decides, screw the rules, I'm putting on the armor. He fakes his noble pedigree to compete in the highly dangerous, elite sport of jousting. It's basically an underdog sports movie disguised as a medieval period piece. William's crew is fantastic, especially Paul Bettany playing the legendary writer Geoffrey Chaucer as a naked, gambling-addicted hype man who delivers the greatest ring introductions in cinematic history. Rufus Sewell plays Count Adhemar, a sneering, incredibly punchable aristocrat who serves as the perfect villain, and Shannon Sossamon plays the fiercely independent Jocelyn, William's love interest. A Knight's Tale completely ignores historical accuracy in favor of pure, joyful entertainment. It's hilarious, the jousting action hits like a literal freight train, and it carries a brilliant message: your bloodline doesn't dictate your destiny. You can absolutely change your stars if you are willing to fight for it. It proves that true nobility isn't about titles, it's about the strength of your spirit. To bring our massive list to a close, we are going back to Sherwood Forest for one of the greatest blockbuster guilty pleasures of the 1990s. At number 10, it is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Kevin Costner plays the legendary outlaw, Robin of Locksley, and famously, he barely even attempts an English accent. But honestly, you will be having way too much fun to care. Robin returns from the Crusades to find his father murdered and his lands stolen by the tyrannical local government. He teams up with Azim, played by the legendary Morgan Freeman, who brings gunpowder, telescopes, and actual common sense to medieval England. Together, they build a massive treehouse fortress in the woods, train a bunch of peasants to fight, and start robbing the rich to give to the poor. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is great as the strong and independent Marion, but let's be entirely real about why this movie is an absolute classic. It is 100% because of Alan Rickman playing the Sheriff of Nottingham. Rickman realized the script was a bit silly, so he decided to absolutely devour every single piece of scenery on set. He threatens to carve people's hearts out with a spoon, cancels Christmas, and yells at his minions with such glorious, unhinged theatricality that he steals the entire movie. Throw in some explosive flaming arrows, epic sword fights, and that legendary Bryan Adams power ballad, and you have the perfect medieval blockbuster. It shows that true strength is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. And there you have it, you beautiful screen-addicted nerds! 10 epic cinematic journeys through the dirt, the blood, and the terribly unhygienic reality of the Middle Ages. We've seen kings rise, tyrants fall, and more limbs chopped off than a logging convention. If there is one thing we've learned today, it's that history is incredibly brutal, and you should be absolutely thrilled that your biggest daily struggle is paying for a streaming subscription instead of defending your village from a flaming catapult. These movies don't just entertain us, they remind us about honor, courage, and freedom. Now, it is your turn to grab a digital broadsword. Drop down into the comments and let me know which absolute masterpiece I missed. Fight it out down there. Just keep it clean. No trial by combat allowed. If you enjoyed this journey, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks modern politics are stressful. I'm taking off this chainmail before I get a rash. Watch good movies, stay out of the mud, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.